So where was I about fixed up marriage? It turns out that my sister and my brother-in-law Vin got along pretty well, and they have three kids, very nice kids, and they moved to this country 15 years ago, around there. And the kids were really nice kids, and they were very successful in going to college and get jobs and so on. So the marriage turned out to be pretty good. The life in Vietnam is like you live together and you suffer together. You go through crisis together, going through the war and trying to survive. So it's not really romantic. Maybe the first month or so, you could say that it's romantic, but after a few months, the marriage is just going downhill. It's just a life together. That was not much of a romantic romance idea or anything. So that summer I was free. After the summer I quit and went to Saigon, where I enrolled in the University of Saigon. After 3 months or so, I ran out of money, and with my parents having very little money as far as salary is concerned, I kind of dropped out and went into a crucial effort to get out of Vietnam somehow. A friend of mine applied to a school in the Philippines and got a scholarship. Khan, he's still a friend of mine. He now lives in the Philippines. He actually got a scholarship there and went to the school in the Philippines and get a job in the banking system afterwards. He survived the war and naturally married a Filipino girl, and now they're retired and live in Manila, just outside Manila. I tried to do the same thing, but I didn't get a scholarship to go to the Philippines. So, how do I live in Saigon? I tutor students, high school students, in math and science. And I had a bicycle, just drove around the city to various homes where these are rich kids that can afford paying me money to teach them. And some of these rich kids didn't learn anything. Their parents just spent a lot of money, and they spend a lot of time giving me a rough time. I hated it, but I had to make a living somehow. So, and a friend of my family, another pastor in Da Nang, had 3 boys. I became a friend of 2 of those guys. When they moved to Saigon, they had a small apartment, so they invited me to stay with them. So the 3 of us stay in this tiny little apartment. I ride around in my bicycle to earn some money in tutoring and teaching these kids. Out of nowhere, there is a general. Let me see what his name is. General Lay, he married a young wife. He must be in the 50s, and one day he had a troop inspection in the central Vietnam in Hue. He saw this woman who was in a rural area. She was very poor, but she was very good looking. And he followed her and went to her family and asked to see if he could be friends with her. So he followed her around quite a bit. They ended up getting married. She was not too much older than I was, maybe 4 or 5 years older. He was very young. This guy, this general, was 50. The general has an aunt that went to my father's church in Da Nang. And the general knew that in the church community there's a lot of people that are working for the American missionaries or are friends with the missionaries, and they probably know English very well. So General asked this aunt to refer somebody to teach his wife English. And his wife lived in the rural area. I don't know whether she even graduated from high school or grade school. But the general entertained a lot of American in the military. So he wants his wife to be able to speak English. And, so she can entertain the officers. The aunt knew my parents very well, and knew that I just had a job interpreting for the troops in just south of Da Nang. So she said, "Oh, I know this boy. He's very sharp. He knows English very well. He probably can teach your wife." So one day the general sent somebody in a jeep that came over and picked me up. So I came over and met him and met his wife, and he said, "You better teach my wife how to speak English. I trust you, and I'll pay you well." So from then on, every day during the week, in the afternoon, a soldier with a jeep came and picked me up and delivered me at their mansion. And I went in there and taught his wife English for a period of time. I made good income, and that's how I survived for a year. During that time, I was always working with the missionaries to see if I can get a scholarship or something in the U.S. But the American missionaries were peculiar. They still treated us as not equal as the Americans. In Africa, they consider the native in Africa savage. They made a point of pointing out a lot of things about it. In Vietnam, we were a little bit higher than that. We were kind of dominated by the French. We were an independent people, so they graded us not very high, and not too many people went to college. Not even 50% of the people are not even didn't even go to high school. So the fact of me asking them for a scholarship in America disturbed them. They didn't like that. But their reason is that Americans are doomed in corruption and vice and are evil. They don't want the Vietnamese students to study in America and pick up all the bad stuff in school, in the society, smoking, drinking, partying, even dancing. They frown on that. Hollywood movies, they really frown on that. The missionaries were trained in a very strict religion in the U.S., very fundamental, and they don't believe a lot of things that the American enjoy over here. So they told my parents, don't send your kids to the U.S. He will be so corrupted and you will lose him in no time. So I had no help from the missionaries. I went to the embassy trying to apply.
Did you believe any of that at the time when they...
What's that?
Did you believe any of that at the time when they would make these arguments? Did they say them to
No,
your
I
face?
didn't
Or
believe.
just...
I thought they were just trying to keep the people down. You know, they don't want us to get educated.
Well, do you think was there objection about America, or was there anywhere that was acceptable? Like, you were dead set on coming to America, but were you?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it seemed like you were also open to going to other places because you mentioned the Philippines. Like,
Yeah.
Were you trying for other countries? Was like America your number one choice, or were you your only choice?
Well, I was desperate. I wanted to get out of there because the life in Vietnam was so boring. If I became more religious, certainly the conditions were right in my father's church and in the church in Vietnam. I probably thrived very well religiously because there's obviously they need people to spread out the gospel, so to speak, because that's what the Bible says, and follow the religion, follow the Bible strictly. And there's a lot of support. If you become religious, there's a lot of support because the missionaries are all around you. The Vietnamese pastors are all around you, and the money was there because a lot of people got converted to Christianity, namely Christian and Missionary Alliance, Protestant Church, flourished in Vietnam. So if I chose to stay in that environment, I would probably be very successful.
Did you get a lot of pressure outward? Like, did you get a lot of overt pressure from your father or from missionaries? And how did you respond to that?
Well, my father didn't really tell me exactly what I should do, but he hinted many times that I should be pay more attention to the church in Vietnam and maybe study in the Bible school and become a minister or somebody important in the church. But my parents didn't really try to force me to do anything. They hinted quite a bit, especially when it comes to marriage. They just suggest, this girl is really nice, that girl is really nice, came from a real nice religious family, better look into it, that kind of thing. A lot of overture about suggestions about things. but they never became really forceful in trying to talk me into something. In fact, the last year in Vietnam, they were very glad that I had a high goal of coming to the U.S. to study, even though the missionaries warned them that, you know, better not let your kids go to the U.S. But they're open. They were very nice about receiving my idea of trying to get to America. During the meantime, I was teaching this general's wife. Oh, that's a funny story. Since the wife is young and pretty, you know, a couple of months into the tutoring, the general seemed to be very jealous. I didn't know anything about it. And in teaching her, we were sitting very close together, and we were doing writing and correction or whatever together, and we were laughing, we were telling stories, and we had a good relationship, you know. And the general was very jealous, and one day he came down from upstairs and came directly to me and said that you gotta keep this relationship straight. You are not supposed to sit with her on this side of the table. You go over to the other side and sit opposite to her. So he dictated everything, and he warned me, you know, kind of threatened that you better watch out. This is my wife. And the wife's face was red. She was embarrassed, and but she didn't tell him. She didn't talk back to him. She just, okay, you know. So Nghiem, you go sit over there. and that from there on, you know, we're kind of sit with a lot of space between each other.
Did you think she was attractive?
She was pretty.
Yeah. Did you? I mean, do you think that there was an actual spark between the two of you when you were teaching her, or?
Well, I was kind of enjoying it, actually.
Yeah.
You know, because she's pretty. I was sitting near her. You know, I was young, and I don't know whether I was attracted to her, but I found her very attractive. In fact, she was probably the only Vietnamese that is very well endowed, you know what I mean? So, and she was at home, so she's always dressed casually, you know. So it's not something that turned me on, but it's just something that I enjoy teaching her, you know. And the relationship was just friends, you know, just nothing serious, but the general got very jealous.
Did she ever confide in you anything about their relationship? Did you sense that, like, for example, that she wanted to be in this relationship, or was it strictly like maybe a financial thing for her, or some coercion, or whatever? Do you know?
Well, she did say that he wanted her to learn English fast because he has a lot of entertainment to go through, and she did say that he's very demanding, you know. He's a general, and she said that their relationship started in Hue, and he was very charming, and that's why she got hooked up with him and became his wife. Other than that, she didn't say much. Mostly we discussed things that young people would discuss. Nothing that the general would understand, like the movies or music or whatever. She did say a few things that we both enjoy. But that was an interesting experience. But, I was scared after. I didn't want to damage the job. I want to keep that job. It's a nice job. The pay was pretty good. So, I was a good boy. Just do what he says. During the meantime, I'm still looking for ways to get to the U.S. So one day, I remember that a member of the church in Da Nang, who has a lot of kids going to the church with my parents. One of them somehow became announcer in Voice of America broadcasting in Washington, D.C. The rumor was that the parents probably paid a lot of money to get the people to introduce him to the right people. But that's not very nice to spread the rumor. But he was a very nice guy. He got a job in Washington, D.C. And then later on, a few years later... He was Vietnamese,
this person, or...
Pardon me?
Was he Vietnamese?
Or was he Vietnamese,
okay.
A member of the church. Mm-hmm. And he married another very pretty woman from the church that we were all friends together. We all knew each other, but I was younger. I was about maybe 10 years younger. So this person is Mr. Long. Mr. Long, after working for the Voice of America, he became education attaché of the Embassy of Vietnam in Washington, D.C. And I knew him not very well, but I took a chance. I introduced myself in a letter. I said, I'm from my father's church, and we know your family. And is there any way that you could introduce me to some venue that I can get a scholarship in America? Because I want to get out of Vietnam. I admire you. You have a way to get to the U.S. and maybe you can help me. During the same time, Mr. Long had known a professor at Northwestern University, Dr. Edmund Perry, who was head of the History and Literature of Religion, who was in the process of studying Buddhism and what Buddhism is and how it spread in Southeast Asia. He's a Methodist minister that became a professor. He had a PhD somewhere in Georgia. He's a very respectable professor at Northwestern. He's head of the whole department. And he frequently came to the embassy, talked to Mr. Long about Buddhism in Vietnam, and Mr. Long helped him quite a bit, gave him all kinds of literature, books, things, and helped him find his way through his study of Buddhism. And one day, Dr. Perry came down to Washington and saw Mr. Long again, and he said, "You've done a lot of things for me. you know, you're really helpful. Is there anything that I can do for you in return? Because I'd like to, you know, help you in something you need. Let me know. And Mr. Long pulled out his drawer, got my letter, and said, "No, I have a boy, a son of a good member of my church in Da Nang, and he wants to come to this country to study, but he doesn't have any money. Can you anyway find a scholarship for him?" It was a very good timing on my part, but I didn't know, you know, I just wrote him a letter and forget about it. And because of Dr. Perry's asking that question, the thing came up, and Dr. Perry said, "Oh, give me his name and, you know, birth date, whatever, his paperwork or whatever." I sent in my transcript and whatever, high school. So Dr. Perry went home, and lo and behold, a month later, I received a letter from Aurora College, Aurora, Illinois, offering me a 4-year full tuition, room and board scholarship, 4 years. Just eat and sleep and go to school for 4 years, all paid for. And I was just ecstatic.
Was that a common program that they had then at the time, or was it something that was specially arranged for you? Do you know how many other people received that scholarship or something similar? Or was it part of your larger program? Or?
Aurora, thanks to this registrar, director of admissions, Dr. Clyde Hewitt, he foresee that, you know, the educational system or the knowledge will have to be more global. You know, he said the school is very small. It's a religious school. It's a Protestant school. And they don't have any knowledge of foreign countries. And at that time, there's a lot of fear of the communists. So there are people from Hungary who try to escape the communists. There are people in Vietnam that live in the south, but afraid of the communists take over someday. So the fear of communism was driving Dr. Hewitt into trying to get foreign students to the campus. So they have close to 10 to 12 foreign students each year going to school there. And the school the admission was 400 or 500 people there. That's all. It's a tiny school, but they have money to give to the foreign students. So when I when I was offered a scholarship, later on when I came over, I found out that it's one student from Nigeria, one from Hungary, there's one from Germany, one from Norway, one from Hawaii, and at that time they treated Hawaii as a foreign country. I think it didn't get admitted until 1959. But Doug Leong, he's from Hawaii, he was a foreign student. That was funny. Now thinking back, you know, this guy's from Hawaii and he was in the foreign student committee. Plus a few more. There's one Korean girl that later on committed suicide for some reason. Let's see, who else? That's all I remember. Anyway, let's go back to when I got the scholarship in Vietnam, I kind of turned my nose up to the missionaries. You know, I told them everything. I said, "See, I got a scholarship." They hated that. They really didn't like that at all. But now there's a dilemma. Is that they didn't offer me a way to get to the U.S. And you know, the airline ticket was so expensive, and it's really, I still remember the government of South Vietnam would not give you a one-way trip. You have to have a round-trip ticket bought, otherwise they wouldn't let you go. Well, you have to have a scholarship and a round-trip ticket to the school in the U.S. Otherwise, you know, you can't go. And surprisingly, the round-trip ticket from Vietnam to the U.S. was $1,000, and that was a lot of money those days. So how do I get $1,000? That was just a disaster. After I jump up and down with the scholarship and realize that, you know, where am I going to get this money to go? So for a couple of months, I was trying to apply for help from the U.S. government through the embassy. Didn't get anywhere. And school started in September, and it was August or July or August. I just still in Vietnam. I didn't have a way to go, and a miracle happened. All of a sudden, there's an organization in Saigon called the American Association. They're supported by the United States Operation Mission, USOM. That's where they get the money to help. Every year around before the school started in the U.S., they know there are students that are coming to the U.S. but didn't have transportation. So they had a test going, and surprisingly, there are a lot of people applied. I think a couple of dozen people applied for the scholarship, for the transportation. So I ran down and put my name in, get the application, fill it out, and then I was coached by a friend who's actually a missionary, but he's a young one. He was willing to help. I found out that a lot of questions in the test was practical questions, not theoretical, not philosophical, not asking about history or anything. It's just everyday, simple questions for everyday surviving, living. Like how to read the newspaper, where is the sports section is in the newspaper, where are the one-eye ads if you want to look for a job, where do you look in the newspaper? Let's see, American holidays, what do you do in the U.S.? What is football? How does a football play? What's the game? Describe the game of football. And describe the game of baseball. things like that. It's just random things. And so I was told by the committee that offered the test. I quizzed them. I said, well, what kind of question do you ask? So he gave me a little bit of input. You know, so. And then I asked this the young missionary guy about these things. I'm not sure I told him that there's a test, but I just casually asked him questions about sports and holidays and newspaper, which is, you know, I get the whiff from.
So they told you a lot of things in detail before the test. The things you were mentioning were things that the office gave you hints of, like, you got to know this kind of stuff.
Yeah. They kind of helped me actually.
Yeah.
But because I asked, you know,
Yeah.
I got this question. A lot of people are just afraid. They just guessed. They don't know what the test is. They just read books and trying to cram like crazy, and then they show up and they were surprised that this question had nothing to do with language or politics or whatever. They're just simple, everyday questions. So I got a little bit ahead because I asked the question, and then I had this guy, the young missionary guy, tell me a little bit about customs in America, the sports and so on. So they only picked 2 out of just a few dozen people cramming. They picked a boy and a girl. So they told me I was selected. I was just so glad. And so they, when it comes time to send us to the U.S., they put the girl and me on the first class plane, Pan American plane to the U.S. directly from Saigon to Chicago.
What details do you remember about that flight?
Okay. The flight was, I've never been outside of the country, of course. And I'm not sure I flew Air Vietnam within the city. Maybe once or twice. But they treat you like dirt, you know. Some of the planes trip from one city and to another. It's so close that sometimes the door is open, and they had a piece of wood just close it so that you don't fall out. And they don't fly at 30,000 feet. It's just very low, and it's put, you know. So, and all of a sudden, we got sent and we put in the first class in Pan American, this huge plane that has two stages, 2 floors. This was heaven. I mean, this girl and I didn't know crap about how to behave. They served drinks, liquor, and we both started drinking and got drunk right there. You know, when comes dinner, we just couldn't eat.
Had you been drunk before you got?
No.
This is the first time. Was it the first time you'd ever drunk alcohol before? Or?
Well, maybe I had a beer or 2 at home, but never got drunk. And so they keep on serving us liquor, and the girl was very critical. He said, "Don't be stupid, you know. You gotta save some." I was just drinking, and she was very critical. She acted like, you know, I'm a little brother, and I was mad. You know, I said, "Don't tell me what to do." You know, we were just 2 kids. And we found out that on this trip there were ministers in the government, and they were traveling in coach, and the Americans put us in first class, and that was weird. That was weird. When I found that out, I just closed my eyes. You know, I can't conceive that why did they do that? But that's how the Americans did in the pre-war area. They spend a lot of money, and sometimes it's very silly. You know, like sending 2 kids to the U.S. first class. That was very silly. And I didn't know how to dress, so I had no nice clothes. So I just wore shirts and short and sandals like I used to wear in Vietnam, and that looked really funny in first class. Like this idiot from the country. The girl didn't dress very well either. And one surprise immediately when they flew from Saigon to Hong Kong, first stop, the plane had mechanical problems. So they put us in the Peninsula Hotel, which is the first class hotel in Hong Kong. So we both like 2 little ducks, you know, just go into this fancy hotel, stay there for 3 days, and it turned out to be a weekend. The embassy of Vietnam in Hong Kong had a big party going on. So somehow we found out, and we called them, and we got invited to the party. And I remember it was so cold in Hong Kong, and I had the short sleeve shirt. So we both went there and really enjoyed. And the girl found out that the ambassador of Vietnam in Hong Kong was not a molester, but he liked to touch women. He likes to fondle.
How did you find that out?
Found out because the girl I was traveling with, she got groped by this guy. So later on she found out that, oh yeah, he does that all the time. That was really funny. So we stayed in Hong Kong for 3 days. They fixed up the plane. We flew to San Francisco, and this girl was flown to Minneapolis because that's where her school was. And I was flown to Midway Airport in Chicago. That was a fantastic trip. It's just very educational, but it's eye-opening. This is the first time that we witnessed what it is like life in like in the U.S. You know, we had no idea before it came over. It was the end of August, and I landed in Chicago, and I was telling you earlier about Dr. Perry, Edmund Perry, who got me the scholarship.
So he met you at the airport?
Yeah, he drove to the airport, met me at the airport, and drove me home to Evanston, Illinois, just north of Chicago. And I was telling you about going through Cicero, at the west side of Chicago, with all the black people, just tons of them, just were going mile after mile after mile, and well, I didn't see any white people. I was very confused. I told Dr. Perry, what is this? Are we landing in Africa? So he explained, you know, there are a lot of black people in this country. You know, so that's the first time I found out that there are tons of black people living here.
What do you remember? Like, but your first impressions were like the airports, right? The U.S. airports was the first time you saw the U.S., right?
Yes.
What do you remember? Do you remember anything standing out from Like, you know, when you first landed, you knew you were in the U.S. and things you saw, or...
I was fascinated by the automatic door. You know, I was just going in and out, trying to see how it works. I said, gee, this is weird, you know. Who opened these doors for us? It was very fascinating. Plus the people. You know, there are a lot of foreign people in San Francisco area. That was interesting. But gradually, when we got to the Midwest, and there's a lot less mixture between Asians and Americans, white Americans. But in San Francisco, we just saw a lot of Asians, and that was fascinating. Let's see what else. The weather was pretty cool. On the trip over, actually, Pan American had to stop in Guam and Guam Island and Wake Island, and we had a break there. So I walked around, and it was interesting to see the island. It's almost deserted, nobody there. But there are a lot of old plane wreck. In fact, I had a picture with a propeller. Just stood next to an old propeller that fell off a warplane or something.
Who took the picture? Did you have a camera?
Probably the girl.
Oh, she had a camera?
You know, I don't remember, but I had pictures. Maybe I bought a camera in Hong Kong. I don't know. I don't know who took that picture either.
Well, because did you ever see the girl again? Do you remember her name, or do you
No.
know? Well, then she couldn't have taken the picture because you wouldn't, unless it was a Polaroid, you wouldn't have gotten it from her.
Yeah,
Right?
it's not a Polaroid. I don't know. There's a lot of things that I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't remember why I didn't get in touch with her.
Yeah.
You know, or I get her name and phone number, whatever. I don't really know. And I'm sure she told me her name, but I don't remember.
Huh. But it also sounds like it must have been a long trip because you had 2 stopovers. Like, was this like a week journey, or like how long do you think it was?
It was a long. Was it? Maybe 3-4 days. Well, we lost 3 days in Hong Kong, and the trip over. Well, it's just a stop. I don't think we stay overnight in Guam or Wake. It's just a refuel, I think, because the planes those days don't fly that far. They have to stop and refuel. So it's like a, half and half stop or whatever. But that was the beginning of my adventure in America. Dr. Perry was very helpful. He had 3 boys, and the wife is really sweet, Lena. She was really nice. And Dr. Perry, being a professor, probably didn't make that much money. So he wanted me to have proper clothing, because Chicago area is very cold during the winter. But he didn't want to dish out money to buy me clothes, winter clothes, because they're very expensive then. So what he did was really funny. Every few days or so, he took me out for a ride. And, I thought he took me out to show me around. No, he took me for a ride to visit these old ladies that are very rich. They are rich Methodists. And and introduced me to these ladies, and they loved me. You know, here's a boy straight out from Vietnam that doesn't have a cent to his in his pocket. So Dr. Perry conned them to give me money to buy my clothes. So they must have written a check to Dr. Perry or whatever, I don't know. So after visiting these ladies one day, he got enough money. He drove me to Marshall Field. It's like Nordstrom of those days, you know. Marshall Field store was so fancy. I went in there and, woo! What it's like heaven. So he picked the best clothes for winter for, you know, top coat and suit and tie or whatever, shirt. Bought thousands of dollars of clothing and shoes, and hat too. At that time, everybody wearing hats, so I got myself a hat.
You have any pictures from those days?
Yeah, I still have pictures. So that's how I got the spending money, because of Dr. Perry. He was very clever. These ladies were filthy rich.
So did he give you an allowance? Like, did he give you money beyond the spending for the clothes, or that was just for that?
No. Well, it's after he equipped me with clothes and a nice suitcase. Come time, you know, school starts. Forgotten, September or something, 1st of September. He drove me to Aurora. Settled me down in the dormitory and said, goodbye, good luck. You're on your own, and but you have a scholarship, don't worry. School was great.
Maybe we should stop. We could stop there because we're almost at an hour.
Yeah.
And we'll pick up, like, because it's a good stopping point, you know.
Yeah, that's a good.
Yeah,
That's
and
right.
then we can